I'm Paul Rushworth-Brown, host of Down Under Interviews, History Bards, and Meet the Author in the US. And we're here with a very interesting author, Dr. Gary Kidney. He has written an amazing book called The Eagle Scout Picture. Gary, espionage, World War II, an undercover thriller, a moral and psychological wartime drama. Now, the title, the first thing I noticed with regard to the title was that the Eagle, Scout, and Nazi Germany don't seem to fit in the same sentence. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Sure. It's an interesting observation, really, is the key point here. So both countries had wonderful youth organizations, the Boy Scouts here and the Hitler Youth there. And so our boy was recruited at 17 to go into about 6 months of training before he turned 18 and would arrive in Nazi Germany at 18. The goal was so that he could fit in the Hitler Youth exactly in the same way as he did in the Boy Scouts. And you mentioned kind of the psychological consequences of that. I chose that juxtaposition for that purpose. I wanted to explore what it was like to be a spy, trying to pretend to be someone that you're not. How much of me remains in I in that process of trying to live two lives. And so this book is really about the war and about espionage, but it's about what happens on the inside of a spy.
I was taught to be prepared, to be loyal, to do what was right even when it was hard. In 1940, that belief carried me into enemy territory. I became someone else. I wore their uniform, learned their customs, spoke their words. Every day I worked to survive, and every night I wondered what that survival was costing me. Orders were simple: fit in or die.
Almost all espionage books, the spy is the conquering hero, never has any problems, never has any dilemmas, and this one is different.
But this war is really going on inside of one person, isn't it?
Well, it echoes what's going on outside that. He has to live within a society and a culture. Actually, you could say at 17, 18 years old, he has to grow up in a culture that's completely foreign to what he is normally used to without getting caught. And that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. How did you get inside this? I mean, this Zelly is 17 years old. How did you get inside his mind? Obviously, being an adult, and basically develop some of the feelings that he was going through, or some of the psychological issues that he was going through, because he despised who he came, didn't he?
So I actually let him and other characters in the book inhabit my mind, so that I could let them do what they wanted to do, speak the way they wanted to speak, think the way they wanted to speak, and react in that fashion. And so Zelly was actually an easy character to write. I was a Boy Scout myself, a little bit later in time than he did, but I grew up with older brothers and uncles who are telling me World War II stories and how the things that they learned in Scouts proved valuable in combat. Yeah. And so I channeled that. The most difficult character to write, though, was the antagonist, the Gestapo officer who is chasing Zelly down. And for that, I really had to become a Nazi myself. And that paralleled what Zelly was going through as he changed from Fred Brown to Zelly Zellner.
Mm. So what, talking about, I was a scout as well, many years ago. Originally, the scouting movement was set up to develop young boys for wartime, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. It was, so was the Hitler Youth.
Yeah,
true. It had parallel functions. So if you go back to Baden-Powell in World War I, he really wanted to develop Rangers, and that was where Scouts came from.
Yeah. What sort of similarities or differences did you find between, say, the Scout movement and the Hitler movement?
So one of the things that the book does is it points out a lot of similarities. So the Cub Scout symbol is exactly the same symbol as the Schwarhand, which is what the Nazis used when they took their oath of allegiance to Hitler. The signs
Wow.
are the same. And I don't know whether from Australia that you know this or not, but the original salute to the American flag was the raised arm, palm extended, which Hitler borrowed, and then America decided was so distasteful it changed and put hand over the heart in the old Roman tradition. So there's lots of parallels between those things, and I chose to use them to try to illustrate how one society is not so different from the other, but they reach completely different conclusions, and they chose to do completely different things on the side of morality.
He crossed the Atlantic chasing opportunity, not suspicion. In the wilds of colonial America, a young Scot joins a surveying expedition to draw a line that will shape history. But when a man is found dead, the land turns hostile, trust fractures, and Angus Mackay finds himself standing on the wrong side of the truth. In a world where borders are dangerous and innocence is easily lost, how do you prove yourself when death is already on the line?
That whole idea of him passing himself off as a Nazi, that sort of deception over a period of time would have been really, really, I suppose, exhausting. Was that deliberate?
Yes, it was. So I don't know whether I should give a spoiler away or not. You could say that this book channels a descent into multiple personality disorders.
Right. Okay. Were the moments when telling the truth made the story harder to write?
So there are many truths. Everybody has a different truth, and it's kind of perspective. So one of the questions that Zelly wrestles with about 50 pages into the book is there any truth, or is everything just perspective? And that was an interesting challenge to try to deal with this. He has almost a nervous breakdown sitting in the tear garden when he suddenly discovers that everything that he's been taught about his mission wasn't necessarily true.
Okay. Fascinating. So there's an early decision that Zelly has to make without giving too much away. Why? Why the psychological shadow across the novel?
So I wanted that to be one of the, I guess, hidden themes within the novel, and to try to draw that out, because that's something that I have never seen in any other espionage book. I wanted that to be an element of distinction within this book. And I would think that every spy, in some fashion or another, has to go through that, in the same way that every prisoner of war has to go through that. It's just that it's not talked about. We kind of sweep those mental issues of what you do in your life under the rug and ignore them.
I mean, Zelly actually becomes a young man who is confused, isn't he? And he despises himself with some of the things that he has to do.
There is an element of self-loathing, and there's also an element of redemption in the fact that sometimes he's ordered to do something that he may choose morally not to do, and to bear the consequences of that.
Yeah. So some readers have found the novel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes, I think that's true. I've been told by numerous people that reading this novel makes you feel like you were actually in Nazi Germany during that horrible period in history. And I think if that's the case, I've accomplished a big challenge to get you to identify with the circumstances in the situation and the dilemmas that the boy has to face. This isn't a book that you can read without spending some time thinking about it when you're done and asking yourself some questions. One of those is, what would I have done if I were?
There's a sense in the novel that God is silent. Did you wrestle with that personally
So,
when you wrote it?
So I actually did some research before writing it in the Shoah archives of the Jews who endured the persecution and survived. Many of them concentration camp survivors, others of them maybe have got out earlier, and others of them stayed hidden like Anne Frank and managed to survive war by, like Zelly, pretending to be someone that they were not. And so I channeled that because if you actually spend some time in the Shoah, you see the Jews kind of in a collective, beginning to wonder, why is God silent? Why isn't he doing something? Why hasn't he sent the Messiah at this time to save us? And so God's silence is an important element of the book that I intended to be there. I don't address that directly, but there are some tangential touches to religion within the book.
Do you think that Zelly is heroic or just resilient?
I think he's a quiet hero. I think resilient more than anything else. I think he has a tremendous survival instinct, which may have come out of times in Scouts where you have to work through your frustration and not being able to light the campfire with a single match, and then finally you can do it. And so learning those skills, I think, was important for him in Scouts and beyond Scouts. But I think more than anything else, he just wanted to survive and decided that he could find a way of moving through anything. And that's resilience in a nutshell.
Two women shaped his life, a mother who refused to break and a wife who met every storm with courage. Their stories lived in the shadows until he finally stepped forward to tell them. A Letter Unwritten is the journey of a son looking back at sacrifice, at survival, at the quiet heroism of women the world rarely notices, that families never forget. From the trauma that marked his childhood to the fear of becoming the man he swore he'd never be, this is a story of confronting the past and finding the strength to choose a different path. Through his mother Jo's resilience and Bonnie's enduring love, Randy discovers that even the hardest stories can lead to healing, if someone is brave enough to speak them. A Letter Unwritten, the memoir that honours two extraordinary women and the son changed forever by their courage.
Okay, so hypothetically, 1941, just before the Second World War, let's take a 17-year-old Zelly out of there, and then let's put a young man from today's era in the same position. How do you think what would the differences be? How do you think things would change?
So I think it would be harder for a person from this era to do it. I'm going to assume if we take somebody from this era that they go in not knowing all of the history that we're taught in schools and that we've heard from our elders. And they're going in with somewhat the blank slate that Zelly did. I don't know that by nature we are as hard, maybe softer. I don't think we're as well trained as he would have been coming directly out of Scouts. And I think the times are different enough that would make a difference in the way in which we reacted. But I think the moral compass is probably just as strong with Zelly as it would be from anyone from the Western world, at least. And although the morals are different sometimes in the Eastern world, they still are there and just as strong. So it would be an interesting thing to do. And in essence, when I channeled Zelly, I was doing that. I was pretending that role.
We've come to my favorite part of the show. All right. And what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you 10 quick fire questions.
Okay.
All right. You ready? First
Yes.
question, truth or readability?
Truth.
Was Zelly ever safe? Yes or no?
No.
Nazis or American handlers? Who worried you more?
American handlers. The Nazis would come in a close second. So it's a tough, flip of the coin choice here.
What were those three agents called? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker.
Yes.
They were the three American agents.
That's what he called the three men who recruited him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he had to go, really, because if not, he would have been forced to go, wouldn't he?
So there is a pre-story to the book, about 100 pages that I cut off because I didn't want to delve into the backstory and weight the story down. But at 17, he's going to turn 18 in 6 months. And in the process of telling him this, they tell him, well, you're going to go when you're 18 and be drafted, or you can go now and we'll train you. But if you go at 18, you're going to go right there with no training.
Deception, skill or scar?
Both, but I think we hear about the skill and we don't hear about scar. I think that's often hidden.
Did this book change your view of patriotism?
Yes, it's made me look at patriotism a little bit differently than I would have. Patriotism has changed in its meaning for me. I think patriotism is a touch more, not a showy thing, but an internal thing. And I think helping to write Zelly has made me realize that wearing an American flag on your collar doesn't make you a good American. Good Americans come from deeds that you do and from attitudes that you hold and teach on to others.
Yeah, right. Would you want to meet the real Zelly in the story?
Yes, and I did. The story is really based upon a man that I met was it probably in 2010? About 2007. Okay, so he died in 2010. And he told me the story one day on a beach in Galveston. It was such an amazing story. I said to him, you should write a book. And he says, well, I signed with the government that I never would, but I'm telling you this story so that you can write it.
Right, okay. Wow. That's pretty powerful. A scene that you still find hard to talk about?
So to me, the hardest scene in this book to write involves Zelly having a girlfriend in Germany, and that girlfriend is seduced by the Gestapo officer who is trying to get him arrested for treason. And he happens to be present at the time that they're having sex and overhears it. So that is the most challenging thing to me. So when I read the book again myself, I kind of skip over that part. Rather have somebody who stood firm and had integrity than have a survivor. So I think integrity is probably more important.
Okay. Who would find this, what type of person would find this novel difficult to read?
So one of my reviews says that there's too much bad language in the book. Well, there is, and it's the way in which somebody from that time frame and at that age would talk. So I stayed true to the milieu in which the book was written. So I'll give an example of that. The sex scene that I was just described is far less than consensual. And so I would not sell this book to a youth without parental guidance to actually talk about what consensual sex and non-consensual sex are and how they differ and how one should prefer one over the other.
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw the cover and I looked at, Eagle Scout, I thought, is this this was before we did the research. I said, is this a YA novel, right? But obviously it's far away from that. It's nowhere near that, is it?
Yes. So one of my famous authors of young YA novels, Rick Riordan, wrote me and said he picked up the book and bought it as a young adult novel, and he read it and he said, my entire picture of young adult novels has changed by reading this book. I think this should be more what the young adults are reading because it challenges them to think about lots of things that are going on in their lives that they need to do. So I don't know how we could send a boy off at 18 to war without giving him the knowledge and the stuff that's in this book.
Okay. One word for the cost of pretending to be someone else.
You change. You lose some of yourself in the pretending. And I think you can never get it back.
Right.
Lies kind of linger.
Yeah. So Gary, look, sounds like a fascinating book. I know that it's it's won the Reader's Choice Award and awards on Bookfest and all that type of thing. The Eagle Scout picture. I wish you the very best of luck. Not that you need it, but
Thank you.
thanks so much for coming on the show.
I've enjoyed talking with you.